Sorry for the hiatus. Well, back with the story, I suppose. Landing by Lovely-ish, Chapter 4, Combat Ready. Summary. Danny's second day at UA commences. He gets the opportunity to show off the range of his abilities. On the second day of classes, Danny and the rest of Class 1A started their academic curriculum. First up was English, which Danny couldn't be more grateful for. He got to show off in his native language meanwhile, everyone else suffered in idle boredom. He did at least get to sit behind Midoriya, though, which was nice. Everyone else in this class seemed a little standoffish towards him, mostly because of his plethora of abilities. When class ended, Danny stopped Midoriya, grabbing him lightly by the shoulder. "Hey, you okay, dude?" Midoriya turned around hastily, clearly startled. Oh, yeah, why do you ask?" "You seemed pretty out of it earlier after your visit to Recovery Girl yesterday," Danny explained. "Right." Midoriya's face fell, and his brows drew together in contemplation. I have a lot of things I need to reconsider. Recovery Girl is right. I can't keep hurting myself. I can't keep relying on others." Danny nodded, humming in agreement. "I get it." The two walked down the hall together, continuing to chat. "I left some of my family and close friends back in America. In a weird way, it's like I have to prove I can do this by myself." "You must miss them," Midoriya pointed out, eyes going soft in concern. "Yeah," Danny chuckled humorously. "But I'm here now. I know it's the right decision. Besides, if I'd stayed, I'd only have made things more dangerous for them." There was a long pause as the boys walked into their math classroom. "It has to do with your quirk, right?" Danny trailed off, sitting and looking anywhere but his new friend. "Maybe we can talk about that later. Class is about to start." At lunch, Danny sat next to Midoriya, Ida, and the floating girl, Uraraka. The three native students seemed thrilled to be eating food the hero who worked at the cafeteria was making. Danny, however, was more interested in the food itself. He scarfed down anything and everything, earning strange glances from the small group he sat with. "What?" Danny asked, swallowing the last of his lunch. "I'm hungry." "I've never seen someone so small eat so much." Uraraka laughed as she spoke. "Be careful, Danny. You almost swallowed your fork at one point." Danny laughed, shaking his head in amusement. If only they knew how common of occurrence that was. In the afternoon, it was time for basic hero training, and Danny was walking with the three other students into the classroom. "What do you think we're doing today?" Midoriya asked anxiously as they arrived. "Only one way to find out." Danny smirked through his words, pushing the door open and holding it open for his new friends. Once they were all seated, a tall, blond man with an accent similar to Danny's entered the room, beaming and dressed in garish red and blue costume, cape and all. Danny snickered as if he couldn't help but think the hero looked and sounded pretty silly, but everyone else was taken aback. That shut him up pretty fast, looking to All Might as he introduced himself as. Danny's cohorts muttered and mumbled about All Might's assists and how blessed they were to be taught by him. When the pro hero stood at the podium, he began his speech. "Welcome to the most important class at UA High. Think of it as Heroing 101. Here you'll learn the basics of being a hero and what it means to fight for the name of good. Let's get into it." All Might then revealed that they were doing combat training. Real fights, no holding no punches. Danny, of course, had a bit of a problem with that. He didn't make it known, but as the teacher unveiled the line of hero costumes tucked away at the compartments for each student, Danny contemplated what to do. Nezu would no doubt be having his eye on Danny today. He was too smart not to. The principal would be able to tell that Danny was not holding back. He wasn't exactly looking forward to the inevitable subsequent conversation. The students all went to suit up, and again, Danny was in the bathroom stall, changing carefully as to not aggravate the scars across his chest. They'd been stinging wildly as to the touch as of late, though he refused to tell Aizawa about that fact. No, he didn't want the underground hero to worry more than he already was. His costume consisted of thin, discreet black armor and a signature symbol on his chest. Himself and Aizawa had confirmed that any nude cast of him had been so blurry that the icon hadn't been recognizable. He wore white gloves and white boots, so they looked closely resembled his alter egos, but without the white hair and green eyes. However, nobody would make that connection. Hopefully. Upon meeting in the training block beta, As instructed, Danny could feel the tension cracking amongst his classmates. They were waiting in separated teams of two. One team was designated as the good guys, and the other as the bad guys, as All Might had explained in the rules. Danny made sure to zero in on every detail. This was his first test of heroism, after all. He didn't want to blow up by a technicality. When it was revealed that the teams would be assigned randomly, students began drawing lots, and teams began to form. Danny found himself on a team with a girl named Yayorozu, who quickly explained her quirk to him. She was able to create materials stored from body fat, producing items necessary to aid in a fight. The rules were that the good guys had found a bomb, and the bad guys were hidden in a designated period of time. If they didn't or were detained, the bad guys won. And if it was the other way around, the good guys won. Danny and Yayorozu waited anxiously to see who they were up against, which team they would be on. The first teams were Midoriya and Uraraka as the good guys, and Bakugo and Ida as the bad guys. Danny and the others headed to the observation room. He couldn't help but spark of worry as he entered. All Might settled the doors as both teams prepared themselves, making plans and chatting amongst their own teams. They had 5 minutes to get ready, and during those 5 minutes, Danny certainly didn't like the way Bakugo was glaring at Midoriya. The match started off fairly uneventful until Bakugo jumped out of nowhere and attacked Midoriya and Uraraka with an explosion. Fellow students chattered about Bakugo being unfair, but All Might was quick to correct them, reminding the class that he was to play the villain role after all. Danny, meanwhile, crossed his arms tightly over his chest, trying hard not to react due to his obsession beginning to pick up. His scars stung wildly in response. Midoriya flipped Bakugo when he came to punch him. The two rivals chattered about something, though the cameras didn't have audio, so Danny couldn't hear. The students in All Might talked about the disadvantage the heroes were at from the get-go, punctuating a thought with a fist raised, calling out of Plus Ultra. Danny looked around skeptically. Why was this guy such a big deal? And why did these kids idolize him so much? Wasn't heroes was to someone who protected others for the act itself, not for the fame that would follow? Suddenly, he had much more respect for Aizawa for staying under the radar. Danny decided that if he got the chance to work as a pro hero, he'd do the same. The fight continued, Bakugo throwing a few more punches at Midoriya, who dodged them and tried to use capture tape unsuccessfully. They played a game of cat and mouse, Midoriya running and hiding as Bakugo yelled, clearly having a breakdown of sorts. Uraraka and Ida were in Danny's peripherals, as everyone else in the room. But his main focus was on the other two, the obviously arguing teens. There was something deeper there, he was sure of it. The two were facing off again after only a few minutes. Bakugo having found Midoriya, Bakugo sent a massive blast in the other's direction, effectively busting a hole inside of the building. Danny started shaking, vibrating with the need to protect not only his new friend, but everyone in the building. He felt sick. He was sweating hard. All Might's yelling voice faded into the background as a high-pitched ringing took over. Was it done? Had Midoriya died? Danny couldn't see him. Just before he had completely lost it, the dust cleared enough to see Midoriya and Bakugo again, the former on the ground, while the latter sauntered towards him. Danny let out an ice-cold breath he hadn't known he'd been holding, and there were a few complaints about his classmates about the cold. It was coming from Danny, something he sometimes did when he was stressed automatically, but he couldn't get himself under control enough to stop putting out cold air. Bakugo and Midoriya continued to argue back and forth, and eventually All Might told the explosive faux villain that if he made another blast of that caliber, he would be intervening. Danny nodded, his eye glued to the screen as more cold air radiated outward. Okay, seriously. Yayorozu turned to Danny now, shivering. You got to stop turning this place into a freezer, Danny. There were a few mutters of agreement, though the students were just as enraptured by the match that they didn't really sound convincing. Bakugo charged Midoriya, who countered. From the countered attack, Bakugo flipped over Midoriya and burned the latter's back. Without any thought, Danny surged forward, green eyes radiating dangerously as he bore elongated canines. Whoa there! All Might stopped Danny with a single hand thrown out in front of him. The teacher was looking at the fight. Calm yourself, Danny. Danny let himself be pushed backwards, trying to reach a rational part of his mind, but then Bakugo punched Midoriya in the back, and Danny was hissing into the air, running forward again. The class looked at him, their focus oscillating between the fight and Danny's outburst. Midoriya slammed into the ground, and ringing in Danny's ears turned to screeching. Time moved like honey as Midoriya ran far away from Bakugo. Their banter continued, and Danny all the while shook furiously. The two charged one another, and Danny couldn't take it any longer. He flew into the air, going intangibly through All Might, hearing a gasp as he did. He flew towards the training block at high velocity, raw instinct guiding his every move. Just as he was about to make it into the building, there was a burst of power and air upwards, smashing windows and busting through the ceiling with no struggle. Danny stopped midair in awe at what had just happened. From a spot above the building, you could see Uraraka had won the match, even though that wasn't what he was looking for. He flew down, smoke parting for him as he rocketed through the many floors that had a hole been punched through. Just as Danny had reached the level he was looking for, Midoriya swaying ready to hit the ground. Danny caught him just before he did, eyes glued to Bakugo, whose eyes were red and bore into his own, now green. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" Danny's voice echoed unnaturally as he yelled. He wrapped a layer of ice around both Midoriya's arms, looking down with his eyes fluttering back to Bakugo periodically. Bakugo continued to stare in horror as Danny checked Midoriya's vitals. He ended up sitting with crossed legs, Midoriya's upper body in his lap as he checked him over for any other injuries before the shattered arm and the other burned. All Might entered the decimated building, and Danny bore radioactive, glowing green eyes right into his. "Danny, we need to get young Midoriya to the infirmary. I've summoned some boss to carry." "You've done enough," Danny hissed out. He could feel his eyes narrowing in the way that they did when he was mad. Xehanort called them his cat eyes, as they came to slithers, just like cats. "You should have stopped the fight. Instead, your students hurt because of you." "Danny," All Might tried to counter. "I said enough." Danny let a hint of his ghostly wail into his exclamation. The entire building shook a bit, but he couldn't find himself to care at the moment. "I'll be bringing Midoriya to Recover Girl myself." Without another word, Danny lifted Midoriya into his arms, flying into the air and making his way back as quickly as possible to the infirmary. Once he faced into Recover Girl's office, he set Midoriya down on a cot, nearly startling the elderly lady to death. "Mr. Fitton, my goodness, you scared me," Recovery Girl cried out. "Midoriya's been hurt," Danny stated, pulling a chair up to sit next to the cot. He stared at Midoriya, worry drawing against his brow. "All right, well, let me take a look here." Recovery Girl trailed off. When she was done with her assessment, she planted a kiss on Midoriya's forehead. He settled into his consciousness farther. Danny nodded at the scene, satisfied with the care his friend would be receiving. Just as he was about to leave, Recovery Girl stopped him, clearing her throat and drawing his attention to her. "Danny, I want to apologize. I talked to Shota, and the last thing I ever wanted was to make you uncomfortable." Danny shrugged, looking pointedly away. "It's okay." "Are your scars still causing you pain?" Recovery Girl's voice softened, and Danny's eyes went downcast as a direct result. "How could you tell?" "I've been the healer for heroes for decades, Danny. I can tell when someone's shouldering an injury," Recovery Girl explained. Come, sit on the exam table." Danny eyed the exam table before shaking his head quietly. "How about a chair?" Recovery Girl only nodded response, motioning towards the chair sat next to her desk. Danny took a seat, and Recovery Girl looked expectantly at him. "I'm gonna need to see the scars if I'm gonna help." "Okay, hang on," Danny spoke after a brief pause. He got up and walked over to Midoriya's cot, closing the curtain hung from the ceiling to give them a semblance of privacy. He walked back to his own seat, nodding and looking away from the nurse. "I'm alright, I'm ready." Slowly, Danny lifted his shirt, hissing out a breath as cool air hit his incision marks. He looked away from Recovery Girl, who hummed lowly as she looked over the scars. "They're infected," she assessed. "Impossible," Danny murmured. "I don't get infections, not anymore." "Well, then you do now, because these are infected." Danny looked down at his chest, biting hard on his lip as he looked at the bright red marks carved into his skin. She was right. It wasn't healing right. Something was wrong. "What kind of material did they use when..." Recovery Girl trailed off, obviously not wanting to finish the sentence. "All I remember," Danny started, stopping to take a deep breath before continuing, "is that it hurt than any normal wound. Hurt more. Do you think it was like poisoned or something?" "I'm not not sure, Recovery Girl muttered, but it's a possibility. I'll need to take a blood sample to know for sure. Didn't Tiz say that? Him and needles? Yeah, they didn't mix before his portal incident. Now, after being experimented on by the guys in white? No thanks. Can we not? Recovery Girl pursed her lips, clearly not liking the answer. How about you meet myself and Aizawa here after class? You go back and finish. I'll page him to meet us here later. Yeah, okay. Danny agreed reluctantly. Thank you. With that, Danny was flying back to the observation room, landing on the back of the group silently and leaning against the wall. There was a finishing of a battle, each team gathering themselves and heading back unharmed in the room Danny was in. All the way was supposed to go. Teams from separate teams high-fiving and chatting casually. Danny glared hard at Bakugo, then All Might. He'll have to watch out for those two. When All Might turned around, he startled. Oh, young Danny, I am afraid I didn't notice your return. Well, I did, Danny snarked. All Might nodded, letting a puff of air out flaring out from his nose. Let's see who's next, then. Lucky as always, Danny and Yaoyorozu were up next. Said to be the villains to their team, he hadn't been very observant of the others' quirks, even names, but luckily Yaoyorozu had him covered. So, Kaminari over there? She pointed at the blonde with spiked hair and a black streak. His ability is to send out an electric blast. Danny shivered at that. Him and electricity would mix even worse than he did with needles. That being said, he would have to be careful around the other team. Alright, and her? Judo's quirk manifests in long headphone jacks hanging from her ears. She can use them to hear anything through solid matter at an amplified volume. Huh. Then he hadn't heard of that as superpower, though it was cool, he had to admit. I'll float it off the ground then, so make sure they can't track me down. Probably puts me in a good position to be in the offensive. Sure. Yaoyorozu agreed. I can use my quirk to fortify the door and create traps so that they don't make it up to the weapon. She looked at Danny, eyes flickering over his suit and back to his face. Okay, you have me stumped up. What is your quirk? Oh, Danny swallowed hard. He'd prepared an answer, though he knew it wasn't very convincing, and Yaoyorozu seemed really smart, like jazz level smart. I call it a ghost. I can do what ghosts can, with a couple of distinctions. I can fly, go through solid objects, use ecto-like energy to produce blasts and shield, and then there's this ice, and Yaoyorozu held up a hand, strange expression on her face. We don't have all day. What do you have planned, then, after assessing the situation and considering your quirk? I don't really have a plan, Danny shrugged, grinning and no doubt showing sharp canines he'd grown in last month or so. His theory was that he was going through some form of ghost puberty. Aizawa was simply at a loss with it all. But I know how to fight. Can you trust me? Just don't hold back. Yaoyorozu nodded as she spoke. The time was up shortly thereafter, and Danny and Yaoyorozu readied themselves. Upon being told to begin, Danny went invisible, facing through the floor and searching for the good guys. He found them quickly, going up one floor and whispering into his radio his teammate. Found them. Going for capture. Truly, it wasn't even a fight. Danny invisibly tagged Jiro in a moment, earning a high squeak. He guided her to the ground so she was seated and unharmed, focusing his attention then on Kaminari. Danny? Damn, what even is your quirk? Kaminari called out, looking out for Danny with no success. Danny surged forward after a moment, tagging Kaminari's feet in his hands with one quick movement. As he went to guide the blonde down to the ground, he made contact with him, and a pre-prepared electric shock left from Kaminari to Danny. Kaminari was already captured, which was good, because after that, Danny was left incapacitated. His invisibility, fell off him, and in a second he was on the ground, convulsing and screaming wildly. He clawed at his chest, and he screamed through clenched teeth. His scars were on fire and spreading to his ghostly core. He didn't know how long he was like that, just writhing and panting and trying and failing to get control. The electricity had long since faded, but the after effect was unbelievably debilitating. My boy, look at me. It was all Mike, bent down over Danny and looking at him with sincerity in his gaze. What do you need? I'm sending you to the infirmary, but I need to know what's going on. Kurosawa. Danny sobbed. The statement, no doubt, too loud. But he didn't care. In the moment the other students picked up on his words, he needed the underground hero. He needed to know that there was somebody he could trust near him, especially when he was this vulnerable. He nodded, and he gently lifted Danny up into the hammock, carrying him swiftly towards the UA's main building. Danny didn't know how long it took, as time felt surreal, but eventually he was back in Recovery Girl office. Aizawa was next to him. So, Danny cried, blinking tears from his eyes and gazing up at his most trusted friend. Hurts. What happened? Aizawa seethed, though Danny knew the anger in his voice wasn't directed at him. Electricity during combat training. Danny trailed off, blinking hard and heaving painful breaths. That and Aizawa urged, scars, they've been hurting. There was a pull of a curtain, and Aizawa and Recovery Girl's energies were pulled away from Danny. He kept his eyes closed, hyperventilating and clenching hard. Again, curtains pulled. Danny opened his eyes slowly. It was Midoriya, wide-eyed and looking at Danny. Danny? Midoriya's voice was low and cautious. Go away. Stay away from me. Danny hissed, fangs poking out and eyes glaring green. Midoriya instead stood up and made his way over to Danny's cot. He kneeled, though he kept his distance away from Danny. His core was physically whirring in his chest and creating a consistent whooshing sound. You're having a panic attack. I need you to take a deep breath, Midoriya instructed. Can't. Danny panted, clawing at his chest wildly. Hurts. I know, Midoriya's voice wavered, and Danny swore he saw tears in his eyes. But I need you to keep taking a deep breath for me. Here, follow me. Midoriya inhaled deeply, and in time with him, Danny took a shallow but long breath. Midoriya exhaled, Danny did as well. They repeated the action, and then again, and again. By the fourth breath, Danny could feel the air coming farther into his body, his nose and lips going numb from ridden with pinpricks. At that point, he started crying instead, sobs, letting his tears flow freely. Can I give you a hug? Midoriya asked slowly. Without thinking, Danny nodded, and Midoriya slowly wrapped his arms around him. The two stayed like that, Danny crying and hiccuping, sniffling while Midoriya rubbed circles into his back and whispered reassurances into his ear. Eventually, Aizawa and Recovery Girl re-entered the small, curtained-off area, both stopping in their tracks when they saw the two teens below. Midoriya. Aizawa's tone was dangerously low. Midoriya, in response, pulled away from Danny and skittered back. I see you've recovered from your injuries. You should be going then, shouldn't you? Yes, Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya rambled. He looked back at Danny, who just settled into sniffling and hugging himself. Bye, Danny. Bye, Danny. I'll see you in class tomorrow. Danny waved goodbye, watching as Midoriya exited Recovery Girl's office. As soon as he was gone, Aizawa was at Danny's side, kneeling and coming eye to eye with him. Danny was now sitting on the foot of the cot, knees hugged to his chest. Danny, how are you feeling? Like death. Danny snarked, the half-joke not earning any reaction from Aizawa. Instead, he stared at Danny, waiting for a real answer. Midoriya was right. It was a panic attack. Well, that's what Jazz calls them, anyway. Your sister, Aizawa confirmed, earning a small nod from Danny. Okay, and you're feeling better now? Danny's eyes snapped from Recovery Girl, who sent an annoying look. He sighed and turned back to his guardian, pursing his lips, considering his neck carefully. My scars have been hurting recently. Recovery Girl thinks they're affected? The thing is, though, I don't get infections. I haven't since I died. Kid, you're not dead. Aizawa started. Whatever, Danny huffed. Since the portal accident. She thought maybe it was the metal they used. It did feel kind of like it was poisoned. But I don't know what they could have used. Probably like a specially made ectoplasmic poison, or like maybe like radiation or something. Aizawa looked sick, considerably pale, as he looked back to Recovery Girl, who only nodded in affirmation. Okay, well, then we should do whatever it takes to find out. She wants to take blood. Danny's voice wavered dangerously as he spoke. I'll be right here, Aizawa promised. And Isabella was right. He was right there, and on the walk home, and at the dinner table, and on the couch, when Danny couldn't stand to be alone that night. Isabella let him climb into bed, and when he woke up with a night terror, Hero calmed him down until he fell back asleep. And that was actually a pretty short one, considering this fic. But I am so sorry for the hiatus. There's been a decent amount going on. And, well, I hope you all have a great day. Eat, drink, sleep, don't die, enjoy your lives. And that's all I have for you.